Hello and welcome to the 2025 Chinese Grand Prix. We're here in the Shanghai paddock. It's been the first of 4 days, the pre-event media day, and a day very sadly overshadowed by the death of former Formula One team boss Eddie Jordan. We'll come to the tributes that are already coming in for Eddie in a few moments, but we're also going to be discussing, because the big world of Formula One always marches on, whatever happens. We'll also be chatting about Lando Norris, things that he's got to say, the championship leader after round one. Lots of comments about how he's going, how he's feeling. The topic of V10s coming back to us. Yes. Ronald, you've been across that all day today. There's also a new track surface here in China and the latest on the Flexi-Wing saga. But yes, we can't start anywhere else, but unfortunately, the very sad death of Eddie Jordan. So with the tributes coming in, let's start with Stefano Domenicali, CEO of Formula One, saying Eddie Jordan will be deeply missed, saying with his inexhaustible energy, he always knew how to make people smile. And I think lots of people will remember that about Eddie Jordan. He was always good with a quip, with a quote, with getting deals done, Michael Schumacher into Formula One, all those subsequent moves, and obviously the team that bore his name still goes on these days to Aston Martin. So obviously lots of people in the paddock knew him, and a lot of people in the paddock very, very sad. And on Aston Martin, Lawrence Stroll, the chairman, also the owner of Aston Martin, paying his own tribute, saying Eddie Jordan was a true racer, a great leader, and one of the biggest characters in our sport. Eddie Jordan, you'll be missed, and we hope everything is as okay as it can be with your family. As I said, Formula One does march on. We hope that doesn't minimise anyone's pain or anyone's suffering, but other things to talk about, of course, today. And in a way, that's what sport and competition is ultimately all about. It's a helpful distraction from everything else going on in the world. So let's do exactly that. Let's talk about Lando Norris. He had quite a lot to say, as he always does, in the press conference, Ronald. Particularly interesting, saying that, the McLaren is the class of the field, but he doesn't actually like driving it, right?
No, that was the main talking point in the press conference. I was one of the guys asking him about it, and I think he gave an explanation lasting almost 5 minutes.
It's very Lando.
Yeah, which is good for us. But it basically refers back to Australia, where he said, the McLaren car of this year is much quicker than last year, but it's also trickier to drive. And he elaborated today, and he said, actually, in terms of driving style, it doesn't suit me at all. And he explained it. He likes to attack corner entries, he likes to be aggressive on the braking, he likes to have a strong front end. And he said in all those elements, the current McLaren car is actually quite weak. That's what he said. So he said, I made a switch in my mind. I basically stopped asking the team to make the car as I like, but I just adapt myself to whatever's quickest, and that's the current package. Still, it's funny that you have a guy winning a Melbourne, clear favourite to win here, saying, well, actually, I don't even like the car at all. The funniest part is afterwards, I went to this media session with Max Verstappen. He got asked about Lando's comments, and then he said, wait, what? What did Lando say? And we said, he doesn't like the car. Which car? The McLaren. And he said, his own McLaren. So he was quite surprised to hear that. But I think Lando explained it quite well, but it's still funny to hear from the driver that's leading the championship, that's the main favourite for this year, saying that the car doesn't suit him. So
absolutely. I put it back to you, and I think I did at the media centre, because we're professional, we prepare for these videos. I'm pretty sure Lando said exactly the same when Max was complaining about his car in 2023. This is just what the drivers are like. They are chasing perfection, especially with this generation of cars, and they hate being hustled, especially when it comes to that corner entry, late braking, things like that. The cars don't like it. So it is understandable that this topic is coming up time and time again, and it does seem like the McLaren has completely replaced the Red Bull as the dominant package. And on the same subject, George Russell saying, of course, in Australia, that basically McLaren can give up now on its 25 car and still be in a great competitive position in 2026. He was on a roll again. He's still making these statements and these comments today, saying things like, that car should win every race, but he doesn't expect it to win any race. Essentially, the subtext being Max was excellent and nearly won every race in the 23 Red Bull, but maybe the McLaren drivers make too many mistakes. That's why there'll be things to pick up the pieces. What he's also getting at is that they're very closely matched. Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, not what Max Verstappen had in 2023. So therefore, there's likely to be more flashpoints. If it ends up being a sort of Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton 2016 style championship, to pick a recent example, many more in F1's history. Just on that, I put those comments directly back to Lando Norris, and he's almost like, oh, okay, he's commenting again. There's no animosity. I think he's actually loving it, really, seeing it as a compliment, giving it back with a smile on his face. They're worried. There we go, Mercedes. That's sort of explaining it from there. But yeah, interesting. I think it's also helpful. It is a good PR tactic from George to deflect away from the fact that his team maybe not, well, we know ultimately not leading the pack, but also piles pressure on McLaren, and then the pieces may fall his way. But anyway, that's all the talk in terms of the right at the front of the championship, because basically it's the media day. It is all talk. That's essentially what goes on at the start of every F1 event. Another topic you've been talking about, you've been asking the drivers about, is one that recently suggested by FAA President Mohammed bin Sulayem, that V10 engines may return one day to Formula One using sustainable fuels. So that's been a topic rumbling on. What have been certain drivers saying about that?
Yeah, so it kind of refers back to what happened yesterday. There were again some media reports about V10s potentially coming back, maybe already earlier than anticipated, like in the next cycle of regulations. Then this morning I went to the FIA and they were quite surprised with all those stories. They said, well, there's definitely not a working group on V10 engines yet. So they were quite surprised of it coming up. But then we talked to the drivers, I put it to some of them, and you saw an interesting pattern, because especially Honda and Audi, they are quite keen on the current 2026 plans with all the sustainability goals. So when I put it to Nico Hülkenberg, he said like, yeah, it's all noise and we should just continue in the path that we are working on already. I put it to Fernando and he said, yeah, we cannot go against our times, and you know, V10s was great, but the current engines are so efficient, so we have to appreciate it. Then I went to Max.
It's just on Alonso, that's because Aston Martin will be using Honda power
exactly.
from 26.
Yeah. So it perfectly relates to Honda and Audi, the two brands that are most keen on the hybrid regulations. So then I went to Max, who basically has no agenda and just likes...
Always says it like it is.
Exactly. Yeah, so he said like, yeah, I'm not the one to ask because I don't make the rules. But he said, I remember being a kid, being at racetracks, hearing the sound of a V10. It's something pure, like a pure emotion. That were the words that he used. And he said, yeah, I would love for V10s to return to F1. And then he got the follow-up question, could it make you stay in F1 for longer? And he said, well, maybe yes, because it's much more exciting than what we have currently. So it could even be a way to keep Max in the sport longer, maybe even beyond 2028 when he runs out of contract. So yeah, it's quite an interesting comment by him.
Absolutely. Well, this Shanghai track, obviously joining the calendar, I think 2004, 2005, the very end of the V10 era.
Yeah.
But there's been a bit of a difference in 2025, even compared to 2024, and that's that the whole track surface has been relayed. I spent the early part of the morning asking various drivers and team members what difference that would make, what potentially how that might change this event. It's a sprint race as it was last year, so it's still going to be quite tricky. Always the classic thing there, one practice session, they have to get their setups right. Then they go into qualifying. I hate this format because then there's another. they come out of Parc Fermé after the sprint race and they can get it together, as Red Bull did, for example, in Qatar, very well. Great job. But I just think I prefer the 2022 way. That's me going massively off topic. But anyway, essentially what the drivers are saying, changes have been done purely to eliminate a lot of the bumps around the place. I probably need a refresh and upgrade anyway, but that's the main thrust of it. And if that's been achieved, they'll find out in FP1, as they hope. That means there'll be significantly less when it comes to compromising on setup, so ride height, what various little things you've got to change at the back of the car. That caused a bit of a problem for some teams last year. And in one other track update I've got for you, remember how the grass kept catching fire here last year and there was never a satisfying explanation? The track seemingly suggesting that it was to do with the paint that was on the grass surface. The FIA's position being, it's actually sort of the gases bubbling up from the swamp that this place is built on. Those two things obviously not sitting together, but I do understand that the grass in that particular area not painted this year. Okay. So if it catches fire, it's definitely not the paints. But anyway, well, Ronald, we better get to our final topic, and that is, it's a pretty big one potentially, the Flexi-Wing saga. We know there's a big clampdown coming at the Spanish Grand Prix, particularly when it relates to the front wings, but after Melbourne, the FIA deciding that they're going to introduce even more stringent tests on the rear wing. So what have the drivers and teams been saying about that today? Yeah,
teams were forced to fit cameras to give the FIA a better picture of what actually was going on. And it refers back to Bahrain testing, where Red Bull was quite unhappy. Pierre Wache said like, the mini DRS trick is still happening. They still felt like McLaren was doing it. So then the FIA looked at all the footage from Australia. They said, really important, all cars were legal in Melbourne, so no question about it. But yeah, it will be more strict when they apply the 75 kilo load. The margin was 2 millimeters, it will be just 0.5 now. And then all eyes are basically on McLaren. And then we got Lando in the press conference and he said, well, Nothing changes for us. We don't even need to change our car. Our car was legal in Australia. Our car is legal here without any changes. And then it gets interesting. He said, if anything, we can exploit it a bit more. So yeah, he went one step further. Some suggestions in the paddock that Alpine might be one of the teams to get hit. But yeah, we have to wait and see. Maybe not only this weekend, but also Suzuka and Bahrain to get a clear picture, I reckon.
Also, George Russell saying that Mercedes and Red Bull, in his opinion, not having to change their cars at all either. But we shall, as you say, Ronald, find out tomorrow. Head to autosport.com for a full tribute to Eddie Jordan, and we shall see you back here for the rest of the 2025 Chinese Grand Prix.